You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
All right, folks, welcome back to Shoe In Show. We are going to try to focus on the debate that just took place. We are going to try to focus on, as professionals, things that you did not hear on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or any of the other kind of talking heads, as I like to call it, interesting talking heads. First off, when we talk about debates, obviously there's a few things to note as we tee up this conversation. Number one, it's the earliest debate we've ever seen in a presidential election in our lifetimes. I don't know whether they kept, George Washington's debate schedule back in the day, but it's the earliest ever. It is also probably the first time we've seen a change in candidates from a party so late in the game leading into this. So, you have the Biden-Trump debate, he drops out, and then the age of the debaters drop precipitously in this one. And it was very interesting because right now, as far as we know, it's the only one between the two candidates. So it mattered a great deal. It was an outsized impact. Typically, we have three, among the candidates debating each other on issues. Right off the bat, we got Matt and Thomas both on today with myself.
Hey.
Right off the bat was trade. Right off the bat was tariffs. And so let's talk about that because that's the biggest impact, I think, to our industry in this election. Whoever wins is going to have a completely different view on trade and tariffs for the most part, and as well as tax policy that will impact companies. So it was interesting. Right off the bat, Kamala Harris was talking about a national sales tax that Trump was presenting, talking about his tariff policy. And Trump brings it right back to this idea that that's not true. And it's actually, the people paying for the tariffs are China and other people. So Thomas and Matt, first points on the trade and tariff initial debate right off the bat.
I thought it was fascinating that was the very first issue, and Vice President Harris chose to lead with that. She mentioned a couple of tax issues, but then the question was on the economy and are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And she brought in Trump's proposal for a universal baseline tariff of 20%, that's a number he's thrown out there, and also 10%. And she called it a national sales tax, she called it the Trump sales tax. Said it would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month, that it would result in $4,000 more a year for middle-class families. So she took that position. And then Trump said, I have no sales tax. She knows that's not true. We're doing tariffs on other countries. He mentioned that countries are finally going to start paying the U.S. back for all we've done for the world. The tariff will be substantial in some cases. He talked about taking in billions of dollars from China. He did mention two interesting points with that. One is the fact that the Biden-Harris administration kept his tariffs in place. And he said they had to keep them in place. They couldn't do everything they wanted to do without them. So that's the first thing. And then he also mentioned, I had tariffs and I had no inflation. So he was trying to make the argument that tariff policy is not directly tied to inflation, looking back to everything he did during his administration with tariffs and making the argument when it comes to inflation. So, Matt, I don't know if you had the same read or what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I kind of joked with my family, like if you had on your bingo card tariffs in the first 5 minutes of the only 2024 presidential debate, you won. It's not often that the things that we work on, the nitty gritty things behind the scenes that we work on trade policy, make it to the forefront of a national conversation during a presidential debate with 67 million viewers. But it was a welcome comment from the vice president in the sense that at least she's talking about how tariffs or sales taxes or taxes on consumer goods, and there's an impact as goods come across the border. Foreign countries do not pay those tariffs. American companies importing, the importers of record pay those tariffs, and that gets passed on to the consumer. And for those who are listening, we have plenty of examples that we can share with you if you're interested. All that being said, the question comes down to, and he put it, and you just mentioned this, Thomas, but he asked the question we've all been thinking, and I'll quote him, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. Not only that, they've added to them. He didn't mention that. He was a little off his game on kind of the counterpoint of the debate, but they've added to them. And so he didn't even say that, but that's another argument that I've heard. So my question comes down to, will the vice president's opposition to Trump's future tariff plans translate into action on his previous tariff actions should she win the election? Meaning she has all this rhetoric. She's teeing up this narrative. It's positive to me in a sense because he's not talking like this. But what is she going to do about it? Does that mean she's just not going to do the 20% tariff and leave everything else in place? Or on day one, if she wins, will she retroactively go back and strip some of those out because she views them as taxes? And so we've got to keep holding both of their feet to the fire in this because she didn't come out with like a proposal of, she told us what she's not going to do, but she didn't really tell us what she's going to do in regards to this issue. So I think that remains to be seen.
I think that's part of the problem too with the Harris campaign is there aren't a lot of policy positions. And we pointed that out. The moderators were really tough on former President Trump for not having a plan when it comes to healthcare. It's been 9 years. Where's the plan? But they didn't have that same pressure on Harris as, okay, the follow-up question would have been, all right, so you don't like the 10%, 20% proposal for universal baseline tariffs. Well, what's your plan when it comes to trade or to tariffs? We haven't heard that. We don't know the details. Okay, she doesn't. She said it's great. It is great. It is a great thing that she is digging in when it comes to trade policy and tariff policy. She also made a comment too. You're not running against Biden. You need to remember that. That was kind of a zinger that she did during the debate. And so, maybe on trade that's different. But we still, even after this, we still don't know what that looks like. There have been some positive signs. This is a regular talking point on her campaign about, and she's mentioned it in North Carolina, another state that's very much in play, another swing state, when she's used the nearly $4,000 a year for middle class families. That talking point about tariffs. Also at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, the Democrats put up 3 Republicans who voted for Trump. One of them who was a White House press secretary, another one was a mayor, and another one was an Alabama construction worker who were all switching to Harris. And the Alabama construction worker, Kyle Sweetser from Mobile, he brought up the fact that the tariffs were the reason. He said he saw the result on prices for him, on his construction business, and that was enough to change his mind on Trump's intentions. Trump was in it for himself, and so he was going to vote. He was all in for Harris. After I think he said he voted 3 times for Trump. I guess in primaries too, but with that, so we've had some positive moments on where she is. And criticizing tariffs, but we lack a real plan of what's next.
I'll chime in here and play some devil's advocate. First, do you guys know who the Alabama construction worker? Do you remember his name?
Kyle Sweetser?
No, it was Tomias Crockett. It was very interesting. Anyway,
from Dothan.
Did it? Okay, let's go. Let's go ahead. We'll go forward. We're trying to keep this fun. I think, when I hear her say national sales tax, to me, that is a communication wordplay to talk about inflation without talking about tariffs. I think tariffs, I think people believe Trump when he talks about tariffs the way he does. When he says that China's going to pay him or someone else is going to pay them. There's not a bill that you get when you buy a pair of shoes that lists out specifically what taxes you paid, whether it's city tax, state tax, local tax, federal tax. These things aren't broken out. It's basically, here's the cost of the shoe, and then here's your tax portion of it, right? So it's not really delineated. So until retailers decide to start like really listing out, kind of like in Washington, D.C., they list out the tax, right? There's like 8 taxes now when you buy food. They list them all out. So we're like listing them out. People they don't really know. They're just living their lives day to day, right? They're taking their kids to school. They're going to work. They're taking the kids to, practice or whatever. And they don't have time to think about these intricate details. So Trump's very specific in terms of saying, tariffs are great. And then he pointed out the inflation thing. And so people generally give him a pass. It's an easy communication tool that he has. She has a harder time, and that's why she says national sales tax to change the heat of the language or the temperature of the language around that. What she's trying to do is muddy the waters on the inflation issue, right? She's trying to basically say his hands aren't clean on inflation. He's saying it's the world's gone to hell, the country's gone to hell. She's saying it could be worse, right? He wants to, if you saw this inflation, his inflation would be so much higher. And so in many ways on the economy, I think she's behind the 8 ball because they, were in office when people have these inflation scars, right? And I'll tell you this just anecdotally, and Thomas probably knows this too, from my middle child who's 6 years old now to now my third child who is 8 or 9 months, the price of formula went up 50%. And obviously there's, inflation is going to happen, but you would think over that time frame of over 5 years, maybe 20%, right? Would be normal. It's crazy the amount of prices that we're paying now for diapers and all these things. It's like so inflated. And so I still have scarring. And so I think most people do. So when you're interpreting these debate things the way that they're presented, her communication team is very smart in terms of saying, don't say tariff, say sales tax, say things that would increase prices, that would talk about inflationary issues. And I think a lot of her job is muddying the water on that issue because I'm not sure she can win because his argument and his communication is so simple, right? And forceful. And it's very hard to unpack, what he's done with that. And so, so that's, when I think about it, when he's talking about that stuff, it's very difficult. I think she has a very difficult time on the economy because of what we've seen the past little bit.
Andy, I totally agree with you, man. In fact, the fact of the matter is people aren't into the nitty gritty of what tariff policy is. They can't even spell tariff half the time. Is it 2 R's, 2 F's, is it both? I don't even know. And so, but they ask themselves, okay, I may not know what that means, or I'm not that in tune, or I know they're against China and I don't like what they're doing to my community based on, a factory being shut down. The only way I know how to gauge it is, am I better off financially now than I was when he was president? And so CNN actually had a focus group in Erie County, Pennsylvania, which is one of these swing counties that moves back and forth as a barometer of the overall mood of the country. And it pretty much picks the president. And they had one woman there said, look, I'm not voting for who's in my wedding party. I'm voting for someone who can be a leader. And I know when Trump was president, things were cheaper. I had more money in the bank, right? And that's how they're judging it, to your point. And so that's why he still continues to have a lead in the economy. And as wonderful as her debate performance was, the vice president, and all the platitudes she's gotten for preparation and baiting him and his inability to kind of articulate counterpoints or punches, even on the Republican side, a lot of praise in Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. The number one issue is still the economy, and he is still polling better than she is on that. And that's what it comes down to. And so you can call it a national sales tax. We do. But it's still not going to translate, I think, into this movement towards her on the economy as we move forward. And they have to figure out how to continue to overcome that. But at the same time, we're all paying attention. And if she wins and once the transition begins, we will start engaging with her team as to, okay, the vice president said this. What's that going to mean on day one in the Oval Office on policy? And the industry will continue to help support us in those efforts as we communicate what our expectations are.
I wonder too how many there's like 7 key states in play, And you wonder, okay, how many truly undecided voters are out there, and how much on any of these issues when it comes to trade or the economy, how much of this debate is about convincing these voters in these key states to shift, and how much of it is we've got to drive turnout. I mean, I think that is a key part of this, and why she's asked for another debate. She wants to have debate number 2. She's got it for almost 2 months now, keep the momentum up. She's got a lot of momentum. She has a ton of momentum after this debate. And it's all about who is going to generate the numbers to come out and support them on election day. And so I think as long as she can continue this, and if they do have another debate, I don't know that they will, but if they do, keeping the drumbeat up, I just, right now, I think that's a big challenge to only have one presidential debate and then have all this, the vice presidential debate in October, and that's it. What does that look like?
Yeah, I won't be watching that vice presidential debate, because if this debate was about killing cats and dogs, I don't want to see what the vice presidential debate get into. Anyway, here's the other thing about like debates, right? So the punditry will immediately say who won the debate, right? As if there's some magic way to look at it. Debates are not like just for winning and losing, like who got the most hits, right? So on CNN or Fox, MSNBC, they're going to talk about who landed the most blows or who connected the most blows during the debate. The truth is, from a professional standpoint, it's who actually connects with the right voters. The debate is an opportunity and a tool to do that. And so it's not so much like, did Trump lose? Did Harris win? It's actually like, if you look at it narrowly, I was very focused on who Trump was talking to, and I was very focused on who Harris was talking to. And they had different goals during this debate. One of them was not to lose the debate, but you don't want to lose it. But you've got these narratives you want to push out. And so Trump, his goal really was to paint her as a liberal, a California liberal, an extremist, someone you can't trust in the economy. He muddied water on abortion issues and things like that. Her job really was to introduce herself, and her job was to basically convince people that she was up for the job, that she was presidential in some way. And I think she did both of those. She grew into that role. I think he did some of that, in terms of early on painting her on the economy is not as, maybe not as good as he would run it. Then halfway through, it kind of shifted, right? He kind of became a little bit more erratic, and his arguments weren't really consistent. He missed a lot of opportunities, whereas I think she got stronger during the debate. But I think she showed she was up for the job. She was very narrowly focused on voters in the middle, which is why her language kept going back to the middle about, like, there's more that unites us than divides us. I think we're better than this. Two big things stood out to me. One was when she was talking about Russia and Putin invading Ukraine and taking it and then going to Poland. She mentioned there was 800,000 Polish voters in Pennsylvania. Bingo. That immediately piqued my ears up. And I said, that's really clever, because it's so hard to take international issues and fold it back down. But those 800,000 Polish voters in Pennsylvania matter a hell of a lot this election. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the other part was when they were talking about race, she did not let him off on this debate. The CNN discussion, she said pass. I'll talk about it later. But at this debate, she really leaned into racial identity and how he, in many ways, she went down a litany of things that she claims he attacks Black people on or African Americans. And so that specifically, I think she leaned into it because he has made inroads with Black voters since 2020. And I think a lot of that's on the economy. But her job was to peel back some of those folks back into the camp and point those things out. So I think she did a very good job. Just, if you say overall who won, Harris probably won overall towards the, in the whole of things. But I think she did a very good job of talking to those independents who are looking for a reason to vote for her and not stay on the sidelines, or how many people we flip, to Thomas's point, I don't know. But I do know in the middle, there's at least 10% of the population that are waiting to see who they want to vote.
They're gettable, yeah.
And I think she can flip black voters back over, right?
I think she can too. Yeah.
So that's what I think about when I look at these debates. It's a tool. It's not, who won. It's not a sports game where you say, okay, this team won, this team lost, and there's a point here and a point. And no. It's like these little subtle messages in these debates really matter, and that's something that I know Matt and Thomas do the same thing, but I like zone into the Polish thing in particular was like really like
really smart.
I was like, oh, like that's very interesting, and I thought that she would do more of that, or I thought Trump would do more of that to pull it back down to these individual states. And Trump did some of that on immigration, right? He talked about Colorado, he talked about Ohio, on immigration in particular, but bringing it down to those like subsections shows how close the election is and how much you're thinking about those individual sections of the country and demographic sections as well.
I will say this, if she's going to continue to run a vibes election and not put a lot of meat on the policy bone out there, which is a strategy that could work, winning a debate was more important than maybe in past cycles and with less debates. And we remember Romney crushed President Obama in the first debate. President Obama went on to win easily. Reagan lost to Mondale in the first debate. We've seen that trap before. For her, I thought it was, their team was very happy and pleased with the outcome. They literally on social media said, here's our newest ad, our newest campaign ad, and they dropped the full recording of the debate, and that was it. That was their new ad. And then I think the point on immigration, where it's one of her weakest policy positions as the incumbent, if you will. And when she was asked about it, she gave a few platitudes and then pivoted to the crowd size of a Trump. And he didn't even talk. I mean, he totally got caught with that and entangled in that. It was tactically really, really good. And so, but you're right. This could be a sugar high. If they don't debate again, it'll settle back down into 50% higher costs on baby formula. That's what's going to drive it. And can she overcome that?
I really think she needs another debate to really be competitive, because I mean, if the election were today, it is the sugar high where people are coming off of this and playing the clips from it, the sound bites, the different things he said, things she said. But there's 50 days or more until the election. And so that's a long time. A lot can happen. There always is something, the October surprise. There's one every election, it seems. Something else will happen. And so I think it's a huge challenge to just keep that momentum going. She's got the momentum right now, but week after week after week. And so you need these big moments like what happened with this debate. You need more of those if she has a chance. Otherwise, I do think the way things stand right now, it's going to be it does favor former President Trump.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's a well-known entity. Love him or hate him, or just think he did a good job on the economy and maybe you'll get more money in your pocket, which I think a lot of people in the middle who may be going for him, like that's it. Like, right? Like he's super crass. I don't like how he speaks about people, but he put more money in my pocket. So there's my vote, right? But he's a known entity. She is still introducing herself to people, and people just aren't fully sure yet, I don't think. And so the debate went a long way. To Thomas's point, she probably needs another one to kind of really solidify support and get people to know who she is. Because the challenges with these debates is you had 60 million, 70 million people watch parts of the debate in kind of in real time within an hour or so. Maybe they watch clips on Instagram or whatever, but it's the one time where a lot of Americans see a debate and they'll stop what they're doing and actually watch and observe and try to retain some stuff and think about it. Whereas in the day-to-day, if you're sending out an ad on television, you're either fast-forwarding through the ad or you're tuning out or you're going to the bathroom or you're going to get yourself another cocktail. So there's, as much money as she can raise in many ads, it doesn't mean that it connects. So these debates are really critical. And obviously that's why she's asking for it. I'll put this out as the last kind of point as we wrap this up. In the midterm election, we had this assumption, at least I had this assumption, that The abortion issue was ballooning a couple of years ago, right? So it was a big deal, and it was ballooning issue. And so the question was then, as it is in my mind now, is this an abortion election or is this an economic election? Like, how does a person determine what's going to drive their decision making on this? And I think that's kind of where we're split right now is, whether it's going to look like it was a couple of years ago, because we had this idea that there was going to be a red wave and Republicans were going to take all these seats and really control Congress. And it didn't happen. And it was because abortion was well outside is well outside its mean for people making a decision to vote versus the typical economy side. And so this is a big thing. It's like if people lean more towards abortion as a driver for voting like they did 2 years ago, it favors Vice President Harris. If it's more about the economy, I think it favors more Donald Trump. And this is where I get divided. You ask me, someone says forecast what's going to happen. I mean, that's what I don't know. That's my unknown. It's like who's going to be more voracious at doing turnout on that issue or that issue. And I think and I don't know. And I'm struggling internally figuring that out. And I'm listening to cues here and there, and I'm watching things. One thing I did see that was very interesting was Google search trends during the debate, not afterwards, but during the hour and a half of the debate. The largest political issue searched was abortion in 49 states. Ohio was immigration because people were looking to see if their pets were going to be stolen by immigrants during the debate. But everywhere else was. Now you could say that's not causation. Maybe it's correlation, but maybe people were like listening and not really sure about the abortion law in their state, and they went to go look at it. Maybe they know about the economy and don't need to look up the economy. So maybe it's an outsized thing, but it was interesting that it drove people to look online for that specific issue. And that tells me something. So I'm looking for those things, like what's going to tell me whether it's more economy or more abortion driven in terms of voter psychology to go out and vote and how they're going to cast. That's what I'm looking for.
Also, Trump has a very long list of tariff ideas. I thought it was very interesting during his point. He said the reason that Biden and Harris kept the tariffs is because they wouldn't have been able to do everything they wanted to do without them. And I took that to mean they need this revenue coming into the government. So far, we've got this list where he wants to punish China with tariffs. He wants to replace the income tax with tariffs, fund child care, hit countries that shun the dollar, bring manufacturing back, and on and on. So each week he comes up with a new thing that he wants to do with tariffs.
Pet safety.
That's the latest. So, I mean, we know where he is on tariffs. We don't expect him to change on that, but he also is really big on trying to, he's going to carry out these campaign promises. And so the question is, there's kind of it's getting more and more complicated with what all he wants to do with tariffs. There's going to be a lot of them, but how big the goal is, how big the tariffs are, and that does seem to be his big policy tool. Everything he wants to accomplish, it seems to be
one thing he's never flip-flop on, to our consternation, is tariffs.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see in the 50 days or so we have, what other ideas are thrown out and which ones seem to carry, which ones, if he were to win, out of that list, what's the idea and how big would they need to go to achieve it?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the summation, kind of an insider look. I think we did a good job. I mean, I think we were pretty much
smart dudes. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So,
pat on our backs.
We even unveiled the construction worker from Alabama that was at the DNC. Tomás Crockett. So there you go, folks. Peeling back the onions all the way. Listen, again, we try to keep this fun, but we are meticulously focused on this stuff, and we have a professional mindset on this. So we try not to cover the politics, whatever your politics are. We really try to focus on adding value to the industry. I will say, as we kind of wrap up, there's a website, shoevoter.com. Shoevoter.com. You can send this out to all your employees and your colleagues and your friends and your family to use. It's a public website. It's nonpartisan. It doesn't talk about political parties at all or candidates. It simply talks about what is your plan to vote this election. If you think you're going to be out of town, get an absentee ballot or go to your local Board of Elections or local library where they might be having early voting in person. If you are going to vote in person, know that you may need an ID depending on your state. And you need to know where your polling location is because sometimes it changes. Sometimes the churches flip to a school or a school flips to a library, etc. So those things change. So you need a game plan. So spend 90 seconds on shoevoter.com. Look up your information. Make sure you're registered to vote. If you're not, do it really quickly if you can. But get your game plan down and get your game face on because we're down to the 20-yard line and we're in the red zone at this point. And we'll see who scores. We'll see who wins, and then we'll continue to serve the industry as best we can on the policy side once the new president is in office. So with that, on behalf of Thomas and Matt, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.